It's all here: the romance, the intrigue, the scandal, even the sex. Today, we are talking about one of the most famous spies of the First World War. But is she really one of the worst spies ever? You decide. Welcome back to The Trench. In this series, we tell stories of the First World War from fresh perspectives. If you love what we do, hit that like button. Before the cabaret was cleared out for the night, the piano softly played its final notes, the red velvet curtains slowly fell, and the statuesque dancer took her final bow. Cheers echoed around her as she acknowledged the applause with a slight smile. She was the star of the Paris stage, a woman who commanded attention with every move she made. Her name was Marguerite the Zelle, but to her adoring fans, she was Mata Hari. Born on August 7, 1876 in Leeuwarden, Netherlands, her childhood was not a particularly happy one. By the time she reached her teens, it became obvious that Zelle was unlikely to have a normal upbringing. Her father left the family home soon after her birth, and her mother struggled to make ends meet. Thus, she and her two siblings were often left alone, fending for themselves. As a result, Zelle grew up embittered and resentful towards men, and would later develop an urge for money, sex, and alcohol. In fact, her relationship with her mother was so bad that at age 14, she ran away from home and married an older man, an army officer named Rudolf McLean. After giving birth to a son, the couple moved to the Dutch East Indies where McLean was stationed. However, their marriage quickly disintegrated. Allegedly, McLean, along with other shady figures, got Zelle involved in various scams. They would put on performances in nightclubs. Eventually, Zelle became pregnant by another man, allegedly a British officer. So when her husband caught her in the act, he beat her and threw her out of the house. Soon after, she gave birth to a second son. Zelle was now alone, pregnant, penniless, and with 2 children to care for, so she returned to the Netherlands. However, upon arrival, she was arrested for illegally entering the country. With no money or job prospects, Zelle sent her children to live with relatives and began working as a prostitute. Not long after, she met a wealthy sugar planter named Peter Harmans, and they soon married. This union would prove to be Zelle's ticket to the high life, as her new husband lavished her with expensive gifts, parties, and trips around Europe. However, there was a catch. Peter was also 20 years older than his bride and couldn't keep it in his pants. Their marriage would produce 2 more children, but he would also shackle Zelle to a strict set of rules, including prohibiting her from leaving the house. And get this, he forbade her from speaking to any other men. Not surprisingly, Zelle's marriage didn't last long, and she soon found herself a free agent once again. Now, instead of returning to the Netherlands, Zelle decided to head to Paris. There, she enrolled in a prestigious dance academy in hopes of becoming a performer, but it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. Although she had some success dancing in cabarets, Zelle never quite made it to the big stage. And to make matters worse, her latest flame, a man named Joseph Brunet, got her pregnant yet again. Desperation drove Zelle to consider a drastic measure. In 1904, she wrote a letter to her estranged husband begging for financial help. When he refused, she retaliated by threatening to take her own life. Fortunately for Zelle, a man named Louis Gerlach intervened and saved her from going through with it. He was a wealthy widower, and in exchange for saving Zelle's life, she agreed to marry him. Once again, her problems were solved. Her new husband provided her with everything she desired, including a mansion in Paris, complete with a ballroom. But there was a dark side to Louis. He was a known criminal, wanted for a series of bank robberies in Belgium. Moreover, he forced Zelle to sign a prenuptial agreement which stipulated that if she were to leave him, she would have to give up half of everything she owned. And boy, did she own some things. Now, during the day, Zelle dressed as a wealthy socialite, rubbing elbows with the elite at exclusive parties. But as soon as the sun went down, she changed into a shimmering gown and danced in her own cabaret. Meanwhile, her husband spent his days writing bad checks, defrauding people. When Louis passed forged documents in order to purchase firearms, he was arrested and thrown in jail. Zelle was furious, but according to the terms of their marriage contract, she was obligated to split everything with him. So she sold her mansion and used the proceeds to pay for her husband's bail. Within a year, however, he was arrested yet again, this time for embezzlement. He served his sentence in New Caledonia, a penal colony located in the South Pacific. Zelle flew over to see him, but she didn't stay for long. Just a month after arriving, she returned to France, officially ending the marriage. Although her husband was still behind bars, Zelle's financial troubles were far from over. She had squandered much of her fortune supporting Louis and was now facing eviction from her apartment. The landlady even confiscated her two remaining children and placed them in an orphanage. At this point, Zelle was desperate, and then one day, as she strolled around Paris, she noticed something. Posters advertising a dance audition being held by the German military. It was their way of recruiting female spies. Apparently, German officers believed that female spies could get closer to their targets than male spies ever could. Besides, the German Empire needed all the help it could get in World War I, so Zelle auditioned and was accepted. Given the alias Mata Hari, from the start, she excelled at the job. Soon, she was off to London on her first mission. There, she frequented popular restaurants and clubs frequented by British Army officers. She befriended many of them, eventually learning secrets that could prove useful to the Germans. Among the tidbits she uncovered, plans for a massive offensive in northern France. Zelle slipped the information to a German contact, who relayed it to Berlin. Soon, the Germans launched the attack, resulting in thousands of casualties on the British side. But Zelle's spying days were numbered. After returning to Paris, she attracted the attention of French authorities. The trouble started when one of her lovers, a French army captain, committed suicide. Apparently, he'd been under investigation for leaking secrets to the Germans. As it turned out, the French were already onto Zelle, and they used the captain's belongings to gather evidence against her. Upon discovering compromising letters in his effects, they detained her. Then the jig was up. During her interrogation, Zelle confessed to everything. She implicated numerous other French officers and politicians too. She also admitted to attending German military briefings and to passing along valuable information. Zelle's arrest made headlines across Europe. People everywhere were shocked to learn the extent of her espionage. However, not everyone was convinced of her guilt. The press loved to sensationalize her story, painting her as a femme fatale, a dangerously alluring seductress who used her body to lure unsuspecting victims. But her defenders argued that the French were simply trying to save face. They claimed that Zelle had been set up and that there was no way she could have known that her German handlers were actually German military intelligence officers. Nevertheless, in March 1917, a French court found Zelle guilty of treason and sentenced her to death. She was executed 2 months later by a firing squad at the age of 40. Her legacy, however, lived on. In the years since her death, books, plays, and films have immortalized her story. Some claim she was a victim of circumstance, a beautiful woman who got mixed up with the wrong crowd. Others argue that she was nothing more than a cold-blooded killer, willing to do whatever it took to achieve her goals. Regardless of what you think of Mata Hari, one thing is for sure, she remains one of the most famous spies of all time, and thanks for watching.